Hey folks, welcome to another conversation on your premium business show. That's Business Redefined. We are privileged to have the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, that's UNCTAD, and we are on set with Rebecca Greenspan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.
Great. Let's start from here. We're having a conversation at a time when Africa, by and large, has had knock-on effects from a multiplicity of shocks. We had COVID-19, we had Russia, Ukraine. Just what size of a hit, in your own estimation, has the continent taken from this?
Oh, huge. Let me say that we made in the Global Crisis Response Group that the Secretary General of the UN has set up to look at the cascading crisis effect. We have made a vulnerability analysis. And the number of countries that came up last year as being very vulnerable to the shocks were 94 countries, half of them in Africa. And this is not only, because of Mother Nature. It's because the conditions in which the continent has had to cope with this crisis are really very bad. It's not only the impact of the crisis, it's the ability to cope with it. COVID-19 took away almost all our capacity to cope with a crisis. Yes. And on top of that, climate change has, really strengthened the impacts. And it has been so severe. The Horn of Africa, the drought, 3 years of drought here in Kenya, millions of cattle being lost. What do you do with that? How do you face that? And at the same time, a lockdown and a health crisis at a global level. And then when we all thought that we were going for a recovery process, the war in Ukraine hits us all with inflation and high energy and food prices. And we don't have the instruments to face these challenges alone. We need the global community to do that. And the global community was very fast, I think, probably in the financial side, in the COVID-19 crisis, but we haven't seen the same response, with the other crisis that came afterwards.
Okay. Quite interesting perspectives there. And speaking about the other crisis, the spillovers from Russia, Ukraine, I really have to ask you this question. You're right at the center of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. What's the latest, given the move we saw by Russia?
Well, I think that the first thing that I need to clarify is that in Istanbul, in July 2022, we signed 2 agreements. We signed the Black Sea Grain Initiative agreement for Ukraine to be able to export grains through the Black Sea corridor that was agreed with Russia and with Turkey and the UN. And the second agreement was a memorandum of understanding between the UN and the Russian Federation to facilitate trade of food and fertilizers from Russia to the rest of the world. And it's the 2 agreements that had an effect. Yes, the importance of having been able to bring down international prices of food for 10 months in a row, 23% drop in the food index of the FAO. Yes, and it was because of the 2 agreements that we were able to do that. Unfortunately, Russia decided to terminate the agreement, as you know, just now in July, after a year of the signing of the agreement. And the Secretary General has really lamented that. We were disappointed that Russia did that. They are saying that their side of the deal is not satisfactory for them. In fact, the UN has done a lot, and I have been in charge of that group and that activities, to be able to facilitate trade from the Russian Federation in food and fertilizers. And we have done a lot, but still Russia has decided to withdraw. And so we have seen in the markets, again, the volatility that we wanted to preclude, yes, to avoid. And the volatility is very bad, especially for the African continent, yes. You are a continent of small and medium-sized economies. And so it's very difficult to do this by yourself. When trade is disrupted, like it is through the Black Sea, you know, for both countries, for Russia and Ukraine, so you suffer because transaction costs are much higher. You have to pay much more for shipping. You have to pay much more for insurance. Prices in the international markets suffer. And at the end, the household in these vulnerable countries suffer too.
All right. You've got very strong views about the global finance architecture, especially with regard to the elevated debt pressure